I'm really excited to present the results of a survey that we just completed. This is the first time that it is actually being presented in a public venue. And I hope that this is just the first of many projects like this coming forward, because this is an incredibly important topic. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge this incredible team that we have. 3 of them are here in the room today. We'll be around after this talk, any questions that you might have. 2 points I want to make before I start. First is that there were a lot of great photos and videos in the morning session. I don't have any of those. Now, Leah suggested I sing the results to you all, but I thought I would put them to haiku. That didn't work. So the second, though, seriously, is that I'm going to present today a lot of data. I mean, this is going to be a very data-intense talk. I'm not going to try to put a spin to it. I'm not going to try to message with those data. I'm going to present to you today those data, at least a part of it. And I will say with that there is much more that we got out of this survey than I would have time to present today. There will be a report coming out shortly, and then we will be publishing the various aspects of this survey in the peer-reviewed literature. So let's talk about this topic of no antibiotics ever. We know that ensuring the safety, health, and overall well-being of animals raised for food is an ethical obligation. And I say that as a veterinarian. I say it as someone who works in animal agriculture. I say it as a consumer. We have an ethical obligation to maintain the health and well-being of these animals. Now, we know that there have been many changes to how antibiotics are being used in animal agriculture. Many producers have reduced and or eliminated their antibiotic use entirely. And that has been really fast growing within the poultry sector especially, but all of the commodity groups have seen this trend of moving towards more production in a raised without antibiotics system. We have heard that the demand for RWA products has been growing in the United States, but we've also heard that there are concerns that these RWA claims and the associated practices are negatively affecting animal health and welfare. So the objective of this project, this survey that we conducted, was to prepare a survey for veterinarians and producers in animal agriculture about their experiences and their opinions of raising animals without antibiotics. So before I start, let me just get out a few terms, because there really is no single term for what it is called when you raise animals without antibiotics. We have no antibiotics ever. We have antibiotic-free. We have never ever. For the purpose of this talk and our future publications, we are using RWA, because that is to us what it really means. We are raising the animals without antibiotics. So you'll see RWA throughout this presentation. So we designed a survey using a software package called Qualtrics. It runs the survey online. It has the flexibility to utilize display logic, so depending on how you answer one question, you may then get a different set of questions that follow it. This survey was not in a randomized format where we had a list frame of everyone we wanted to target and we sent out invitations. What we did is we designed this survey. It was supposed to be anonymous. We were hoping for some it would be difficult responses, you'll see, to some difficult questions. But this survey was announced and then disseminated through the professional organizations like the veterinary groups, through commodity and trade organizations, and it was just broadly disseminated. We don't really know the identity of anyone who participated in the survey. Is it representative of U.S. agriculture? We don't know. And I don't think we ever would. Okay? So let's just put that into the proper context. The survey was open from February 15th through March 23rd. So again, it's just very recently closed, and we've spent the last month analyzing all of the data. And those were analyzed either through Qualtrics itself or through Stata and Excel. What I'm going to do is go through now a series of a few tables and then a lot of graphs where I'm going to ask you to look at the color patterns to identify the trends that we see in some of these data. And I know that some of these will be small and the text fonts are small. There is an executive summary that will be in PDF form and I think will be distributed to you all so that you can see these results in the context of the survey. So, who participated in this survey? We had 565 total responses. You can see the commodities that we targeted: broiler, turkey, swine, beef, and dairy. So the respondents self-identified. They self-reported which commodity do they associate with. They were asked about their role within that commodity, practicing veterinarian, a producer, so manager, producer, grower, and then there were some other breakdowns as well. But the predominant two categories across all of the commodity groups were the practicing veterinarians and the producers. And so for a lot of this talk, that's how I'm going to do our comparisons. Either looking at the commodity as a whole or telling you some of the differences that might exist between the veterinarians and the producers. You're not going to see slides today about those specific role differences within the commodity. That would be in our future publications. We really were focused on U.S. experience because, this is where the survey was conducted. It's where there probably is more experience with this RWA shift. We did open it up internationally, and you can see the breakdown. But again, over 90% of the respondents were U.S.-based. Now, the key piece is this third part, experience with RWA. We asked specifically, how do you identify your experience with raising animals without antibiotics? You currently are raising some animals in that capacity. It doesn't mean 100% of production. It just means you have experience and you are doing it currently. You have previous experience. You no longer are raising animals in this fashion. And then we would ask them a question, why did you stop? Or you have no experience with RWA at all. So for the analyses that follow, you're going to see me stratify them into RWA respondents versus conventional. The RWA respondents would be those first two categories, current experience or previous, versus conventional with them, those respondents who have no experience with RWA. And you can see the breakdowns, and again, depending on which commodity you're looking at, if you focus really on broiler, swine, beef, and dairy, it's about a 50-50 split. There was only a single turkey respondent who identified as conventional, and so you are not going to see any results for that one individual. That wouldn't be fair from an analytical standpoint or from that one respondent's viewpoint. All right. So what were the factors that contributed to an individual deciding to raise animals without antibiotics? So on the top is what you see are the reasons why they are currently raising animals RWA. It's those RWA respondents. And again, I can't really point to it well because I'll either be pointing one way or the other, but if you look about halfway down, I should have highlighted it for you, it says to fulfill a client or customer request. That is your major reason that everybody across the commodities gave for why they are raising animals without antibiotics. You'll see in there as well other factors like increase the sale price, gain market entry into a retail program. Market-driven reasons were the primary responses for why they are enrolled in an RWA program. If you look at the health-related issues, to decrease antibiotic resistance, to improve animal health and welfare, to eliminate the use of medically important antibiotics, no. This was a market-driven decision to enter into the RWA space. Now, the conventional respondents were asked, why aren't you currently participating? And what you'll see as the major driver is that second line for the conventional, concerned about the negative impacts to animal health and welfare. That is the most important response that they gave. Now, I want to emphasize the very last line in that table as well, though. Over half of the respondents from those four commodities, broiler, swine, beef, and dairy, identified that they were already raising animals in a responsible antibiotic use program. I want us to be thinking very carefully about what it means to state that you are RWA, you are never going to use antibiotics, at least if you're going to label it with your brand name, versus feeling like antibiotics do play a role in raising animals and maintaining health and welfare, and you enter into a responsible use program. There is a label for such an application. I know there are other labels being discussed, so that could be a major reason why the conventional respondents are staying within that category. All right. What kind of RWA programs are the respondents enrolled in? Are they part of an official RWA type program? And this is all over the board. I mean, we had the private retail restaurant food service type program. We had that some are involved in the packer processor programs. It varied by commodity. There really was no single response that overwhelmed in this case. But you do see that there were many, let's say within the turkey and beef sectors especially, that said that they're not even in any RWA program at all. And this, again, it would be just for the RWA respondents. We asked about what welfare programs are you in? Are you part of any official welfare program? And again, this is stratified by RWA experience. What you see on the RWA respondent side is, again, a diversity of welfare type programs that depended on commodity. So, for instance, in poultry, it's a private retail type program. It varied. If you look over on the beef side, many of them said they're not in any welfare program at all. And if you look down at the conventional side, where they were asked the same question with the same set of responses for welfare, again, beef had a very high proportion saying they're not in any welfare program at all. Now, swine isn't on this table because for the swine piece, we felt it was important to list some of the specific programs with which they may be familiar. And so here's the table of the swine response for welfare, and the major response was about PQA+. You can see that over 75% of RWA and over 90% of conventional identified as that being the welfare program in which they're enrolled. All right, I'm going to shift to figures now, these graphics. And it's really about what you're going to see are several different types of graphics about these responses. We're going to be looking for color patterns. I'm going to go first through the commodities and talk about the disease challenges that were identified and then the welfare challenges that were identified by commodity. So let's start with broiler. The graphs that you're seeing here, there's two types. On the left is a heat map. Okay, so what this heat map is showing is that the darker the color, the more important the respondent said that that disease was. They were given a list of diseases. If you can read them all, they're there on the left. They were asked to rank them in order of importance within their system. And so the most important disease challenge, whether you were conventional or RWA, was necrotic enteritis. And those of us who work in the broiler industry we know that that is just a constant challenge for us. What you see on the right in those colored columns now it's by rank. Each column represents a rank where the color represents the different diseases within the rank. So that most important rank on the left of those columns is in red. That is necrotic enteritis. So what you'll see in our reports as we publish them are presenting these disease challenge data in two different formats. One where you see the heat map of disease by the different ranks that it got, and then the column graph that shows the diseases that made up each rank. So for broiler, again, it was necrotic enteritis, and then there were a couple others, erysaculitis, gangrenous dermatitis, and bacterial osteomyelitis. The welfare challenges that were identified, again, these are the welfare challenges that they experience on their production units, whether they're conventional or whether they're RWA. For the conventional respondents, negative impacts on performance. That is the biggest challenge that they see that they face for health and welfare related issues. Increased morbidity mortality would be 2. Again, this is about their practices currently, not if they were to switch into RWA. That's a different question that I'll get to in a bit. On the RWA side, increased morbidity mortality. Number 1 health and welfare challenge identified by the RWA respondents within the broiler production system. All right, then we ask questions about what is the impact of RWA on production and on management. So on the production side, it would ask questions about, they were given 4 different categories or outcomes and asked whether they were decreased, no change, increased, or weren't sure about the effect of RWA production on that outcome. If you were a conventional respondent, it asked what the impact of switching into RWA would be on that outcome. So if you look first on the top left, you're looking at the RWA respondents in broiler. Increases in 7-day mortality, increases in total mortality were the 2 most important health and welfare challenges identified. If you look to the right on the conventional side, increases in 7-day mortality, increases in total mortality would be their major concerns about switching into an RWA system. So we have identified now, even for those who are raising RWA, you're looking at their stated experience with the health and welfare challenges on production. What changes would be required in management in order to raise animals' RWA? That's the bottom 2 figures. Decreasing age at slaughter, increasing the downtime between flocks, decreasing your stocking density, possibly increasing your grower pay, all identified by the RWA respondents. And if you look on the conventional side, it pretty much mirrors that except for perhaps age at slaughter, where they strongly felt you would have to increase the age, where it was more of a no change for RWA. So there is a correspondence, a corroboration of these results between the RWA respondents' experience and the conventional respondents' opinions about switching to RWA. I think some pretty significant health and welfare challenges associated with RWA. If we jump to turkey, again, you can look at the diseases, coccidiosis, bacterial enteritis, the two most important that were identified. The welfare challenges, performance, and increases in morbidity mortality. Again, these are identified by the RWA respondents within turkey. It mirrored what we were seeing in broiler. And if you look at the effects it would have on production and management, same basic trends. These are their experiences. Increased 7-day mortality, increased total mortality, questionable effect on feed conversion, perhaps no change to an increase in condemnation. And if you look at the bottom, again, you would need to increase your downtime, decrease your stocking density, and increase your grower pay. Consistency across those results. If you jump to the disease challenges of swine, there were a couple major ones. The sort of a respiratory-related syndromes, Lactobacillus haemophilus and Streptococcus suis. Also mycoplasma pneumonia, but post-weaning hemolytic E. coli was number 2 for both the conventional, well, it was number 1 for RWA, number 2 for conventional. So you have some major disease challenges that are being identified. What will come out in the report that's not here is we asked them questions about whether there were effective interventions that were non-antibiotic for these specific disease challenges. They were asked then yes or a no, are there effective? We didn't define effective, we just asked, are there effective controls? And then we asked, would they be management changes, would they be feed and water additives, or would they be vaccination related? And again, those results will be in the full report. When you look at the welfare challenges, respiratory, it was the major issue that the swine respondents identified. And if we look at some of the specific production and management changes, again, increases in morbidity, increases in mortality, were identified both from the RWA experience and the conventional respondents about their concerns of switching. If you look down below, we again have the management changes that would be required or necessitated by switching into RWA. You've got decreases in weaning age, perhaps no change but to air filter, but your biosecurity would need to be improved. You've got space allowance. You've got a variety of features that, again, are consistent across RWA and conventional. Within beef, it's bovine respiratory disease. Sounds a little bit like the swine piece. It's respiratory. This is their major challenge, whether you're conventional or RWA. And if you identify the health and welfare challenges, again, it was respiratory. When they were asked about the production and management issues that they faced, again, these were combined for beef. You see some mortality is definitely there as an increase, and death loss as well. The conventional respondents were much more concerned about those changes than the RWA respondents said that they had actually experienced. But in general, you still see these same effects. RWA production linked either an experience or an opinion of concern to morbidity and mortality. On the dairy side, it's mastitis and it's respiratory disease. And when asked about some of these same welfare challenges, it's respiratory disease, it's central nervous system. So again, some of these will be detailed out and stratified by the role, whether it was a producer identifying those challenges or whether it was the veterinarian. And if you look at the production and management issues that the respondents discussed, increases in culling rate, increases in cattle morbidity, and so you've got morbidity, mortality showing up again. All right? So those are the disease and welfare challenges that we saw within each of these commodity groups. I'm going to shift gears now and show all the commodity groups together as we ask some very focused questions about the impacts of RWA specifically. And the way that these questions are going to be phrased is that they're going to have a Likert scale response. So the response in this question that I'll get to on food safety, for instance, they can choose that it impacts it from significantly worsen up to significantly improve. Okay, so the colors in the bars that you're looking at on these graphs, if they are reddish or pinkish, that is worsen. If they are bluish, that means they're improving. And the gray in the middle is no change, no impact. Okay? Each of these bars sums to 100% of the responses, and you're looking for a shift, either to the left or to the right. If it goes to the left and it's redder, what you're seeing then is that they think it's getting worse. And if it's to the right, they think it's improving. So this first question asked, how do you think that raised without antibiotic production impacts food safety? Okay, so this is the respondent's belief. And you see it stratified within each of the commodities by RWA versus conventional. Didn't matter which commodity you're in, broiler, swine, beef, dairy, or turkey, or whether you are RWA and conventional, the trend is shifted to the left. The majority of the respondents think that there is either no change or food safety is worsened by raising animals RWA. That is both by RWA experience or the opinion of the conventional respondents about shifting to an RWA system. So that's the first piece. The second part of this question asked, and this is a more difficult one to phrase, so I wrote them out on the bottom. In your opinion, how do retailers, restaurants, food services think that raised without antibiotics production impacts food safety? So this is the respondent's perception of customer beliefs. Notice all the bars are now to the right, and they are blue. The respondents, whether they be veterinarian or producer, believe that the customers think that food safety is being improved, even though they responded that food safety is being worsened. Okay, back and forth. The respondent's belief, the customer's belief. That is quite a disparity in response or in beliefs. The other aspect of this question was about health and welfare. How do you think that raised without antibiotics production impacts animal health and welfare? And now the shift is even further to the left. There is a lot of dark red on this slide. Most of those respondents think that RWA production is either slightly worsening or significantly worsening animal health and welfare. And when you compare that to this follow-up question, what they believe the customer thinks, it's blue. The customers who are purchasing RWA, at least according to the respondents, their perception is that the customer believes that animal health and welfare are being significantly improved by RWA production, whereas their experience is that it is significantly worsened. This was the most dramatic difference in that we observed in that survey. Again, back and forth. Health and welfare, if I could get it to move. There it is for the respondent's belief and the customer's belief. I will say that there are differences by role. The veterinarian tended to be much more concerned than did the producers. So the veterinarians were much more heavily shifted to the left, meaning significantly worsened on this question than the producers, and that was pretty much across the commodities. But again, the details of those numbers will be in the report. We asked questions about impact on cost and then impact on demand. This is either your experience or your opinion about what are the costs of raising animals without antibiotics. It's a Likert scale, but I didn't want to try to tell you which is better or worse, so we didn't use a color scheme that seems for some to have a connotation. Brownish colors are for significantly and slightly decrease the cost. The green hues are for slightly or significantly increasing the cost. And it doesn't matter which commodity you're in or what your production practice is, RWA, the perception by veterinarians and producers is that RWA production significantly increases the cost of production. But we followed that up with a question about demand. How do you think that RWA production impacts the demand for your protein? It wasn't about your animals specifically, it's about overall demand of your protein. And most of these responses are either in the no change to slightly increase. It's It's hard for me to imagine how that is a positive return on investment when you have a significant increase in cost, but most are thinking that there really is not going to be much of a significant increase in demand. This next question is probably the most troubling, so this is maybe the only place where I'll insert my opinion here. I'm going to read you exactly up on the top how it was phrased. There are times that maintaining an RWA label has priority over flock herd, health, and welfare. And the range goes from strongly disagree to strongly agree. The responses are all across the board. They cover that entire range for every commodity and for every production type. The fact that there is green on this slide is where, as a veterinarian, as an animal ag person working in industry, as a consumer, I am concerned. I would hope to never see anything in green there, knowing that health and welfare are being sacrificed at the expense of a label. And I'll leave it at that because, again, I didn't want to put my own spin or interpretation to much of this. But this is out there. These are the data we got. They'll be in that executive summary. We asked questions then that followed that about should there be more auditing and assessment. So the question was about what is your opinion about the need for more RWA auditing and assessment? So this includes RWA respondents about their own auditing and assessment. And you'll see whether you were conventional or RWA, and regardless of commodity, most are either somewhat agreeing or strongly agreeing that we need much more stringent auditing and assessment of health and welfare within RWA production. We asked questions now. There were 4 questions related to antibiotic use, and they were just supposed to strongly disagree to strongly agree with the statement. The first of these statements was, antibiotic use in my animals does not cause problems in humans. And if you look at the figure, you see a lot of blue, light blue to dark blue, meaning that they agree to strongly agree with this negative statement, that their use in animals does not cause problems in humans. So that includes RWA. You may be asking, well, how does RWA even fit in there? So they may have been responding based on their opinion in general. Even within RWA production systems, there are times those animals will get diseased and will require an antibiotic, so they may be responding based on that event. Regardless, most of these respondents are saying that they agree with the statement that their use of antibiotics does not cause problems in humans. There was a statement about antibiotic use in my animals will make it harder to treat infections in my animals in the future. And this one had a wider range. It covers from the strongly disagree to the strongly agree, probably tends a little bit more to the disagree side of this equation, so that their own use of antibiotics they view may be inhibiting the ability for them to remain efficacious in the future. I'm not really sure where I'm supposed to be pointing. All right, antibiotics, this is sort of the inverse of the first statement they got. Antibiotic use in my animals leads to bacterial infections in humans that are more difficult to treat. And you can see that the majority across all commodities strongly disagree with that statement. And finally, I would be willing to treat my animals with antibiotic alternatives if they were equally effective. Across the board, agree to strongly agree. So I think what we've been able to do is you start to assemble some of these questions like this one with the commodity-specific disease challenges. Their statement about the gaps that we have for interventions also helps direct us towards a research program of where are these problems in production that need help. A lot of this, I think we already knew what the disease challenges were and how ineffective many of our control strategies are. As many of us know, nothing works like an antibiotic. But what we found is that across all of the surveyed commodities, the main reason for going RWA was market-driven, the response to fulfill a client-customer request. Specific other responses, market entry, sale price, okay? Those are the reasons why the RWA respondents shifted into RWA production. If you look at the conventional responses, why they are not going RWA, concerns about negative impacts to animal health and welfare. By far the most important choice they made. And again, many of them said that they were already in a responsible antibiotic use program. We found this huge discrepancy between what the respondent believes and the perception of that respondent of what the customer or retailer believes. Again, respondents across all of the commodities believe that RWA worsens animal health and welfare, whereas they think that their customers believe that health and welfare are significantly improved. That is a major communication gap that somehow we have to close. And again, that difference was not as pronounced about food safety, but it was still there. This disparate opinion about food safety, experience versus what the customer actually believes. Across all of the surveyed commodities, respondents agreed with the statement that their antibiotic use does not cause problems in humans. They disagreed with the statement that their use leads to human infections that are more difficult to treat. But the respondents were mixed in their opinion about the relationship of their own antibiotic use and their ability to treat animal infections in the future. And finally, again, this is a concern. Many respondents felt that there are times when that RWA label is taking priority over animal health and welfare. And because of that, I would assume, I won't put a causal conclusion to it, but across all of the survey commodities, respondents generally felt that there was a need for increased auditing and assessment of animal health and welfare in RWA systems.